Turn to Canberra for a moment. It is the last sitting week of Parliament for this year. Joining me is the Trade Minister Simon Birmingham. Thank you for your time. Medevac will be put to a vote this week. We just had that confirmed by Matthias Cormann. Does that mean that you have secured a deal with Jackie Lambie, or you're close?
Laura, you'll forgive me for not seeking to predict everything that will happen on the floor of the Senate chamber, and certainly also for not going into the detail of negotiations or discussions with individual Senate crossbenchers. We think that repealing the Medevac law stands on its merits. It's an unnecessary piece of legislation because there already were and would still continue to be the powers for the government of the day, based on medical advice, to transfer detainees to Australia, but with the government of the day having firm control of those matters. The problem with the Medevac law is it weakens the control of the government of the day, and what we've seen is that of the 160 plus transferees to date, only around 5 of them are actually in hospital, and that really does question that this law is necessary relative to the fact that we could have a much tighter control for government and scrutiny by doctors who understand all of the circumstances of the cases and the treatment options that are available in other countries.
Are you prepared to put this to a vote and lose?
Laura, we're proceeding with the legislation in the Senate. How the Senate ultimately votes is a matter for the 76 senators on the floor of the Senate chamber. So losing is always a chance.
What would be the consequence of that? Is it, taking a more principled stance?
Well, our principles are clear. Governments will lose votes on the Senate floor. Governments nearly always have and always will. That's just the nature of the way our bicameral parliament is built, and the fact that governments of the day virtually never have a majority on the floor of the Senate.
Okay.
So we just have to work through that reality and work as hard as we can to do what we believe is right in the best interests of securing the nation, in the best interests of protecting our borders. We have been consistent all along. This legislation is unnecessary. It's legislation that weakens the control that the government has over these decisions, and that's why we want to repeal it.
Jackie Lambie has put solution A and B to the government. That's about the extent of the information we have at the moment. Do you know what those options are?
Even if I had those details, I'm not going to play them out on air. As I said, nothing is gained.
Who knows? Who knows what the options are? Does the Prime Minister, does the Home Affairs Minister, does the senior team in the government, do all the Liberal backbenchers know?
Well, I don't have a list of who knows. Of course, Jackie is having her discussions principally and primarily, as you should, with the Portfolio Minister, Minister Dutton. That's the way these things normally and generally work, and that's the way that we handle it, dealing respectfully in an engaging way, direct with the Senate crossbenchers.
So when this comes before a vote, Senator, will you know what you're voting for?
Yes, but if their requests align with the interests and values of the government and the policy positions of the government and what we believe is in the best interest of the nation, well then of course we work through sensible requests. If they don't, then we don't agree to them and we move on to other scenarios and options. That's the way I'm sure any of your viewers would expect us to
So you
work.
don't know now, but you will know by the time you get to a vote, and you'd expect everyone in that chamber will know what they're voting for.
People in that chamber will be voting in relation to the Medevac repeal bill. That's the legislation that's on the chamber. And I would say to Senator Lambie or any of the other Senate crossbenchers, or indeed to the Labor Party, and the Labor Party are the ones who created this mess and this circumstance, they ought to reconsider their position. They're hopelessly divided when it comes to temporary visas. They're hopelessly divided when it comes to the way in which they handle border protection policies, and that's why they ought to really reconsider their position on this. It's now been in place for a period of time.
Sure.
We've got 160 plus transferees, only 5 of them are in hospital. It's a clear demonstration that some are using this system Labor put in place with the Greens and others to be able to get around the type of protections our legislation should have.
But if there is a quid pro quo here and there's a national security matters in which Jackie Lambie has discussed with the government, will everyone voting in that chamber, the Labor Party, the Greens, your side of government included, will they have all the available information to them, whether contained in the bill or without?
Well, the bill is a transparent piece of legislation.
I know, but there's a quid pro quo here that we don't know about yet.
No, the bill is what people are being asked to vote upon, and they should vote for the bill based on the merits of that bill. That's what we would expect any individual senator to think about. That's what we urge everyone on the crossbench, in the Labor Party, elsewhere to do, to vote for a bill that can help to ensure the integrity and the strength of our border protection policies.
So the calls from Labor to have these national security matters that we don't know about yet, to have that discussed with them on a bipartisan basis, that is essentially being rejected.
If Labor want to talk about the repeal of the Medevac laws, we would welcome them to the table. But I'm not seeing any sign from the Labor Party that they are waking up to their error and their mistake in passing these laws with the Greens and others as part of a pre-election stunt in the first place. Now, it was a pre-election stunt. Good luck to the Labor Party. They got away with their stunt. It backfired and they lost the election. They ought to go back, actually, and have a look at the failures and recognise that the lack of consistency and cohesion in Labor ranks on border security is one of the things and one of the reasons why Australians just don't trust them on these matters.
Just a few quick things. Malcolm Turnbull has called on the Liberals to be loud Australians when it comes, or moderate Liberals to be loud Australians when it comes to climate change. Does he reflect the sentiments of some Liberal moderates?
Well, I think what we need to do is absolutely firmly deliver upon our emissions reduction targets, and that's precisely what our government is doing. And yeah, we ought to shout our commitment and our achievements in relation to emissions reduction from the rooftops, because we've had great success as a country meeting and exceeding our targets in the first Kyoto commitment period. We will meet and exceed our targets in the second Kyoto commitment period, and we've outlined clear and detailed policy measures to meet our Paris targets out to 2030. And so when you look at the different periods of climate change reductions, Australia has done well in terms of meeting the commitments we've made, exceeding those commitments, and we ought to be proud of that. And as a government, we ought to be proud of the climate solutions policies that we have outlined and took to the last election, of our measures such as the recent $1 billion extra investment into the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, the new National Hydrogen Strategy, the investment in terms of continued work around Snowy 2.0 and the Battery of the Nation project in Tasmania, all of which are quite transformative measures. And do you have a problem with Nick Xenophon working for Huawei, just quickly? Well, I only just saw that before I walked into the studio. Look, Nick is a private citizen. I'm unaware of the nature of the work that he's undertaking, but I'll be interested to hear what his continuing colleagues who were elected alongside of him think about that. Strategic Council, apparently, crucial assistance as they seek to defend themselves against malicious attacks. Sounds ominous. Well, as I say, it's for Nick to explain the nature of his work. He has parliamentary colleagues still serving in this parliament and the South Australian Parliament, so what they make of it, we'll see. But look, the government's policy in terms of clear protections for our critical infrastructure, including emerging technologies, are clearly developed. They're not applied, targeted at any one country or any one company. They're about protecting Australian infrastructure, including telecommunications, into the future. Okay, Senator, thanks for your time.